ahead and introduce our key speaker today, our guest speaker, Mike Johnson. And in order to introduce him, I'm just going to read to you from the news release that went out last July when he received the National Garden Club Award. So this is what it said. Mike's unparalleled passion for conservation can be seen in his commitment to the dozens of projects he has successfully completed in his career. His work has had an immeasurable benefit to the residents of Summit County and beyond, and we're thrilled to see him recognized at the national level. Among his numerous achievements, Johnson has guided endangered species recovery projects for over 1,150 populations of 226 rare, threatened, or endangered species, including the federally listed Indiana bat, northern long-eared bat, and northern monkshoot. In one of the state's largest stream restoration projects, he recently completed the final stage of a 15-year effort to restore 5 miles of stream and 100 acres of wetlands at Pond Brook in Liberty Park in Twinsburg, a project almost entirely funded by external grant funding that Johnson has secured. So along with Summit Metro Parks and others, we're just grateful to be able to be in this space. I think that this space is a good monument for the future work that we would like to see. And so we're grateful to get to hear from you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. So, it's on. Okay, take your time.
Mm-hmm. And I encourage those on Zoom to set in the upper right-hand corner, you can set your view to side by side with speaker or side by side gallery. In that way, you'll be able to see Mike as well as his presentation.
Well, thank you again so much for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. And this topic is very, and I'm really happy to be here to talk about what I'm doing and my department is doing with regards to urban ecology. The talk that I'm giving today is urban ecology and the Summit Lake project. I want to talk a little bit about just in general what we deal with when we are managing urban ecosystems, and then talk a little bit about this particular project, the Summit Lake project.
Mike, can I ask you to take a couple of steps back from the camera just so we can see your face?
How's that?
That's perfect.
Is that good? Okay. Really quick, a little bit about our mission and who we are. We conserve, sustainably manage, and value our natural resources for the health and enjoyment of our community and to inspire people to connect to nature. At our core, we are a conservation park district, and that really kind of guides everything we do throughout the county. What is urban ecology? You know, that I don't know that there's really a very good definition for what is urban ecology. Really, the question is, what is urban? And here in Summit County, probably all of our natural areas are technically considered urban. Even our Cuyahoga Valley National Park at 33,000 acres would generally be considered by most biologists to be an urban landscape. So, you know, but clearly there's a gradient of urban, you know, some of our parks are more urban, some of them less urban. Some of the characteristics that our urban habitats have in common are these three major things. These are the three things that we deal with in our urban natural areas. And the more urban the natural area, generally, the bigger these problems are. Habitat fragmentation, invasive species, and human-nature conflict. So really quick, that first one, habitat fragmentation. This is really the biggest one that we see here in Summit County. Anytime you take a natural area, you say you'd have a 100-acre natural area and you cut it in half with a road, now you have two 50-acre natural areas. The biodiversity that you lose when you do that is significant. So if the biodiversity of a 100-acre natural area, let's just say it has a biodiversity value of 100, if you bisect it into 250 areas, those numbers don't add up to 100 anymore. It's less than 100. You lose species when you bisect habitats. And really, in Summit County, this is a big problem. We are crisscrossed with roads and developments, utility lines, gas lines, you name it. We have a very fragmented habitat. These fragmented areas, the biodiversity effect that connection has is really very synergistic. I call it the mathematics of biodiversity. When you take area 1 that has, if confluence has a biodiversity of value of 2, and you add it via a greenway connector like the Tuscarawas River to the biodiversity of Firestone Metro Park, the result is not 4, it's 5. So that's really, in an urban landscape, that's really the best thing you can do to address habitat fragmentation, is looking for key ways to connect those fragmented, isolated natural areas. The next thing that we really deal with a lot in our urban areas are invasive species. An invasive species can be a plant or an animal. They are introduced from outside of our area. They're usually from Europe or Asia. They are non-native. When they're introduced into our landscape, they often tend to escape, and in some situations they escape and they dominate our ecosystem. They take over. This is a great picture. Those flowering white shrubs, that is a tree or a shrub called Bradford pear. They're very common. They are still sold at your local nursery. It is one of the worst invasive species we deal with. As you can see, they don't stay in your backyard. These trees are rapidly running away from where they were planted, and they are taking over. The problem with invasive species is they don't support our local wildlife. They have no value to the species of organisms that live here, and they also have no natural control mechanism. So they kind of go, they reproduce uncontrolled. Take a look at this picture. This is from very close to where we are at Confluence Metro Park along Long Lake. This wall of vegetation that you see here is one of our worst wetland invasive species. It's called Phragmites. It's a tall, very beautiful grass. Most of our invasive species are unfortunately very beautiful. They were brought over, quite many of them as ornamentals. This is one of our worst. It has no value to local wildlife. And if you look close where those little bumps are down there, those are some biologists, and they're trying to attack that wall of Phragmites that's taking over the wetland. That didn't work. We actually had to bring in a helicopter to treat this area with an herbicide. Herbicide is the #1 tool that we use to treat invasives in our natural areas. We could have a whole discussion about what are the long-term effects of using herbicide in our natural areas, but we don't have time for that today.
What about goats? Do they ever try goats?
We have not tried goats. Goats have been effective out west at controlling certain types of invasive species. We have not tried that. And there's a host of reasons why we haven't. The goats will not eat Phragmites. It'll kill them if they tried. Yeah. In addition to using ground-based techniques and using things like helicopters, believe it or not, you can now use drones to apply herbicide. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Autonomous drones flying around with a tank of herbicide. This is a growing tool in the field today that people are beginning to use. The next thing that we have is the conflict thing. Anytime you have nature in an urban environment, there is almost always some sort of conflict between nature and people. And sometimes that conflict isn't actually real, it's a perceived conflict. And there's probably no better example of conflict than this particular animal. This is a coyote. Coyotes exist in all of our metro parks, regardless of the urban gradient. We have them here at Summit Lake, and we have them in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. They are everywhere. It is probably the most misunderstood species. The perception among the public is this. is that these are dangerous animals. But really, this is the perception, this is the reality. Coyotes are not a threat to people. People are a threat to coyotes. I tell people, if you're really concerned about being hurt by a coyote, just go to Google and ask Google how many people were killed by coyotes last year. And then ask Google how many people were killed by dogs last year. And it really kind of puts it all into perspective. My marketing director says that does nothing to help people with their fear of coyotes. It only makes them afraid of dogs. But nonetheless, this is the reality. Anytime where you have an urban-human interface, there is a conflict. And these are the three characteristics that we have, or the three problems that we deal with in urban ecology. We know a lot about our coyotes, in particular here in Summit County, and I can tell you our coyotes are doing everything they can to avoid people. We have spent a lot of time studying them, and we study them by putting radio collars on them. We did a 3-year study throughout the district. This is one of our interns holding an animal that has been trapped, and it has been very gently anesthetized. It's asleep right now, and in the middle is another one of our park biologists who is kindly modeling a radio collar that we put on the coyotes. We use radio and GPS collars, and we studied our coyotes over the course of 3 years to see how they were interacting with people. We have a whole presentation on that, but really the bottom line, the thing that we learned is our coyotes are trying to do everything they can to avoid us. Many of you may be familiar with this area. This is Montrose. That's the Big Acme in Montrose by I-77. And you probably, if you've ever been there, you've probably seen this great big pond that's in the middle of the parking lot. It's a stormwater retention pond. It was also the home for one of our study animals. He lived there for an entire year and nobody ever knew it. He lived in an old crushed culvert and probably ate small rodents that lived around the stormwater pond. Spent about a year there. Nobody ever knew. I want to talk, before I talk about what we're doing here at Summit Lake, I want to touch really briefly on another new park, our Valley View area. This is Valley View. Valley View is a former golf course. It's in Akron, right at the confluence. This is the Little Cuyahoga. That's the main stem of the Cuyahoga. It is nestled in between the communities of Akron, especially the North Hill neighborhood and Cuyahoga Falls. Like I said, it's a 200-acre former golf course. We just acquired it. The really important thing to see, I mean, in addition to this being an island in an urban area, is how it connected the other natural areas. It was really that missing fragment that we needed to connect all of these. Now we have over 1,000-acre continuous area from Gorge Metro Park through Cascade Valley, the Valley View area, touching on San Juan Metro Park before the Cuyahoga River then flows into the Merriman Valley and off to the national park. Just an interesting aside about Valley View before I get into the natural resources. The whole Cascade Valley Metro Park is really has been adopted by Akron's very vibrant and growing refugee community. And the refugees kind of found us before we found them. We found them, or we discovered them fishing in our parks, and they were utilizing techniques that were unusual to us. They were using casting nets, and they were taking and presumably consuming fish that people normally don't consume around here. And this is a really good example of the human nature conflict and the perception. In this case, the perception or the misperception was ours. It was the metro parks. Our immediate perception was you can't do that. But as we took a closer look into what they were doing and talked to state and federal regulators, yes, they can do that, as long as they have a fishing license. So we've been working with the refugee community in that North Hill area for many, many years to make sure that they know that they're welcome in the park and what the park can offer that community in terms of recreational resources. So that has been just a wonderful experience for us over the last 10 years. But like I said, when we got Valley View, it looked like this. It was a beautiful, lush green golf course. Unfortunately, all that lush green is non-native and it had to go. So we literally took it back down to the dirt. We had to start all over. It was a monumental task. As a restoration ecologist, I see this And I'm like, gosh, that's beautiful. I think a lot of people just look at it and they kind of gasp. You did what? This is a good time for an inspirational quote. Some people look for a beautiful place and some people make a place beautiful. I do not know who Hazrat Inyat Khan is, but he Googles a great quote. And again, this is what the end game is for these natural areas. It's something that is not only good for our local wildlife, but beautiful for people to enjoy. Google, once again, back to Google. Google caught our work over time, and I'm going to run through some of these slides. This is the golf course here when we got it, just lush, green, beautiful. This is us killing off all that ugly turf. This is us getting rid of, if you notice here, a lot of the trees have disappeared. We had to take out 350 Norway spruce. They're not from here, they're from Norway. They had to go. And then we've replanted, and immediately the next spring, the whole thing bloomed yellow. And this is a plant that was in the native seed mix we use called Bidens. And I just think it's really cool that Google was able to see that color bloom from space. We took those little golf course ponds and turned them back into beautiful wetland ecosystems that filtered stormwater from the surrounding community. And we also restored about 60 acres of floodplain along the banks of the Cuyahoga near the confluence of the Little Cuyahoga. I was there just recently the other day during the storm event, and that entire floodplain was fully underwater and engaged. It was just a beautiful thing to see. A real quick drone view of Valley View. I like this picture. It just shows the area after we've killed off all the turf. This is immediately after restoration. The really cool thing to see is not the yellow flowers, it's this stream that exists where none did before. That stream feeds this enormous wetland system that absorbs and filters water before it goes off to the Cuyahoga. There's an aspect of art to what we do. I just think this is like painting on a canvas. I've always thought of myself as a Rembrandt, but people say I'm a happy tree guy. So a little bit about Summit Lake. What are we doing here? Really, if there was one word that I would use to describe the Summit Lake project, it is commitment. I'll explain that a little bit as we go. Summit Lake is a part of this much broader project called Reimagining the Civic Commons. And this is something that's being undertaken by a number of partners, including the city of Akron. I believe it is being led by the Ohio and Erie Canal Coalition. And it's this broader effort to look at this entire area, the downtown area, and Summit Lake is considered the southern portion of downtown Akron. And what can we do to reimagine or bring vibrancy back into these communities? Metro Parks, we really focused on this area, the Summit Lake neighborhood. This neighborhood is industrialized, contaminated, developed. There are few trees or natural areas. People have poor access to fresh food. There is a history of racism and discrimination. This is a neglected and forgotten area. Summit Lake, that we're right behind us, this is one of the portage lakes. It's a glacial lake. It has been here for 10,000 years. But it is really, I call it the forgotten portage lake. When we began this project and we were looking at this, my department, we're the conservation department. We deal with the preservation of nature as well as our cultural resources. And we looked at this and we're like, how are we possibly going to bring nature to this neighborhood? This was really a challenge, and we were really concerned about how are we going to fit in here. The first thing we do is we step back and we look at history. Whenever we get a new area and we start to think about what we can do to restore, we look at what did it used to be. This is a great map from 1804 that describes the Summit Lake area as a vast tamarack bog. It must have been absolutely glorious here at one time. But history also the history also tells us how we very quickly started to destroy it. Less than 25 years after that first report, This report details how we dropped the water level of the lake 5 to 8 feet, and we reduced the surface area by about 75%. And we did that to facilitate the canal building era. Summit Lake was a water source for the canal, and actually the canal boats actually moved through the Summit Lake. So for the purpose of industry, the ecology of Summit Lake was greatly damaged. The canal era gave way to development, and for many years, there was a large amusement park very close to where we are standing. The Summit Beach Park operated for about 40 years, and it also hosted the largest swimming pool in the state. And the reason they built this swimming pool is the water in the lake was too polluted to swim in. History, when we do our historical analysis, we're looking for natural history. We're also looking for the cultural history of the area. And we did find that the pool was a segregated recreational resource. The amusement park does not appear to have been segregated, but the pool was. And quite often with segregation, you don't actually find policies saying such and such is segregated, but we did find these interesting editorials in the Akron Beacon Journal from the 1940s, and the Beacon Journal is criticizing the Red Cross for promoting segregation. The Red Cross had a lifeguard training program, and only certain areas were allowed for African American lifeguards to be trained. They weren't allowed in the Crystal Pool. So these are two good editorials of the Beacon Journal, really criticizing the Red Cross for those actions. As we learned in the video, this area was redlined, so I won't get into too much detail about that, but really the area where we are standing was in the redline area that was designated primarily for African American people. It is also this area D, it is the most hazardous. This area that we're sitting in was at one time one of the most hazardous areas to live in the state. And it was because of the industrial pollution, poor air quality, and the effects of this linger today. And I would say, redlining went on into the really went on into the 60s until the Fair Housing Act really got rid of it. But the after effects of things like this tend to linger for a while. This area, this neighborhood still has the highest infant mortality in the state. In the country. Thank you. So step one, gather the information from the past. Step two, let's look at what we have here now. And when we took a closer look, we found that Summit Lake, despite all of the abuse that it had taken over the years, still had a lot of really cool stuff if you take a closer look. Summit Lake is fringed by a relatively low quality but still important wetland plant community. It is a high quality waterfowl habitat. Birders have long known that Summit Lake is a great place to come and see birds during their migratory season. It is a really high quality recreational fishery. Yes, Summit Lake has been polluted over the years, but that pollution has largely been mitigated by time. As industry has disappeared from our region, the water in the lake has moved through. The water itself is fairly clean. We worked with some of our partners to do a study of the recreational fish and the quality of the water. And what we found was that the water is really clean. The fish are abundant, and they are every bit as good to eat as any other fish in the state. All of our fish in the state of Ohio, and actually all of our fish in the country, are contaminated with mercury from coal burning, but the fish out there are no worse than the fish in Lake Erie. So they're okay to eat. The sediment, the bottom layer of the lake is still contaminated, but over the decades, cleaner sediment and material have overlaid that contamination. It is really kind of buried. Summit Lake, because it is a natural glacial lake, it's very deep. That contamination is largely cut off from the rest of the water. So the water's clean, the fish are clean, it's okay to fish, it's okay to recreate on the water. We still don't recommend swimming because you can disturb those sediments. Yes, question?
Just a quick question. You said that when they showed that picture of the coal and everything, that the depth of the lake was reduced by 8 feet and on the area was reduced by 7%. Is that still, is it the smaller lake still the case now?
Yes,
Okay,
that is true. The lake that we see today is the smaller lake. Yeah. But even though it's small, it's still, even though they lowered it 5 to 8 feet, it's still deep. The deepest part of that lake is about 60 feet. That is common for glacial lakes. Glacial lakes are usually very deep. And if you compare that to Lake Erie has an average depth of about 62 feet. The eastern or the western basin of Lake Erie is very shallow. The eastern basin is very deep at over 200 feet. But really, I mean, considering the small size of Summit Lake, it really measures up. There are rumors, urban legends, that the Ferris wheels from the amusement park are out there in the lake somewhere, but we don't know if that's true. That's just probably legend. We found that there were really several very unique relic species that were just clinging on to life around Summit Lake. My favorite is this beautiful flower you see here. This is one of our native hibiscus. Hibiscus are in the mallow family, and because this one grows in wetlands, it's called marshmallow. Isn't that fun? I love that. It's a marshmallow. And we also have an abundance of this fish here. This is a warmouth sunfish. Warmouth are in the sunfish family. They're kind of like a big bluegill with a great big mouth. They are not rare or endangered, but they're also not very common. And you usually find them in glacial lakes like we have out there. What we also found was there was really good potential for reintroduction of things that used to be here that aren't. We know that Summit Lake used to be home to a number of fish that are endangered today. During the industrial heyday, they were eliminated from the lake. Now that the water is relatively cleaned up, is there the potential to reintroduce them? These are two of my favorites. The colorful one is called an Iowa darter, and that one that you see in the hand of that person is called the lake chubsucker. All of these endangered fish are generally pretty small. We know that historically, we know they were out there. They were common through all of the Portage Lakes. We started looking around, trying to find ways that we could, programs that we could develop to reintroduce these. And we actually found that a program already existed and had just been started a few years prior. This is in the black t-shirt is Brian Zimmerman and two of his students and one of my staff. And we are now working with Ohio State University, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and ODNR to breed and reintroduce these endangered fish back into Summit Lake. This is my crew. These are the rearing ponds that we use to raise and breed them. This is the day we were cleaning them out and emptying them. They're usually full of water. In 2021, we were able to reintroduce over 300 Iowa darters, 16 lake chubsuckers, 74 black-nosed shiners, and 230 black chin shiners directly into our Summit Lake. And we plan to do this every year for at least 5 years. And that whole program of reintroducing these endangered fish back into this lake is also the center for is also the focal point of one of our interpretive displays just downstairs that you can go and learn more about it. And you can actually see some of our little baby Iowa darters in a tank. So pulling all of this together is the Summit Lake Nature Center. And, you know, a couple of things about this, when we started getting involved here, we were just doing some prototyping. We had a pop-up nature center. We spoke to the community. We spent a lot of time listening to their experiences and what was going on. And one interesting thing that we heard over and over again is every couple of years, people in suits show up, tell us how they're going to solve all our problems, and then they're gone. And, you know, we were thinking, well, that's what we're going to do. We were not planning to have a permanent multi-million-dollar facility here. But after listening to their stories and after listening to what they wanted, we decided to change course, and that we decided, and I'm very proud of the Park District for investing not only money, but time and people. We decided to become a permanent part of this neighborhood. And I think this is, I've got a really quick video that really does a much better job than me at explaining the Summit Lake project. Can you guys hear that?
And started over.
Helping to improve the neighborhood's reputation. This community.
Let me make sure the sound is being shared really quickly. Sorry. Okay, go ahead and hit back and start it again, maybe. Oh, sorry. Right, Cam. There we go.
With the grand opening of Summit Lake Nature Center, Summit Metro Parks is planting roots in a historically disenfranchised community, uplifting residents while connecting them to nature and helping to improve the neighborhood's reputation.
This community is historically a red-lined neighborhood. It was bisected when the expressway went through, which, further added strife here. The one school that was here was closed and taken down. There's no grocery store here, and it has the highest rate of infant mortality in the state. So there was a lot of need here that we really wanted to see, how can we make a difference here? A nature center can maybe be that flagship for being able to help this community in some different ways.
Park District staff worked with community members to identify programming which would make an impact in this underserved community.
We asked what they wanted. We did what they said. Some of the programs people asked for, they said, okay, we don't want that anymore. I was like, okay. And then others, they said, we like that. Can we do some more of that? And we were like, okay. It was really very simple, but I can tell you, I don't think any of us knew how that will blossom into the relationship that we have with the community today.
Residents of Summit Lake have noticed positive change in the community.
I've been in Akron all my life, and everyone knows, Summit Lake was a horrible place, but now it's like awesome. It's changed so much.
I think it's really helped out the community greatly because it gives them a place to go for recreation and to learn.
Now there's the gazebo, there's the big lawn chairs over there, the grills, the tents, and I've just seen the way that it went from just my regular community to seeing wow, people are actually interested in this, and it just, overall, I have a lot of pride for Summit Lake.
The decades-old story of disinvestment at Summit Lake is now one of renewed pride and love of the community. The lake in the middle of the city that was once contaminated by Akron's rubber industry is now a healthy urban lake ecosystem and a popular destination for exercising, discovering the benefits of nature, and a place to come together.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope this is what you were expecting and looking for.
Wow. Have you all joined me in thanking Mike? What an amazing transformation and story.
Any questions?
Well, yes. So,
Mike,
I want to share. A lot of folks want to visit the Nature Center. They are impressed with this work. It's really resonating with so many of the participants. One of the questions is, Mike, did the tire companies kick in some monies, some funding for the restoration?
No, but I not that I'm aware of. I'm not for the parks, but I don't know that anybody asked them either, to be honest.
Well, that might be a consideration going forward.
They've been asked. I just learned they have been asked.
And one way we might support the effort would be for many voices to perhaps. So another question was, is it any easier to get to Akron from Cleveland?
It's harder.
Last summer, it was really hard to get to Akron.
It still can be challenging, yes.
It's easier to get to Akron getting back to Cleveland may be a challenge right now.
Yeah.
Ask again in 3 months, it may
Yeah, that could change.
change.
You just drove here. You mean it without a car? Is that what you mean?
What do you mean by bike?
They're looking at construction.
I was just thinking road construction is pretty bad.
I mean, you can bike here, like literally from the towpath and make it here. So if there's other means of transportation.
Very good. Cleaner means perhaps too. One question from our group is, how might residents of Akron become more involved with supporting Summit Lakes programs? Can you give us some very specifics?
I would say just probably the best thing is to just learn more about what the programs are. You can do that through our website, through our program and event guide.
And your website is?
www.summitmetroparks.org. And we have one of our naturalists here today, Sarah. I don't want to put her on the spot, but Sarah works here at Summit Lake full time. So do you have anything that you would add to that, Sarah?
No, we do have our programs, the program fence guides, but we're going to do a lot of gardening programs and get folks working with Let's Grow Akron. So we actually have little flyers that we put out. And this community can utilize this garden by contacting Let's Grow Akron. It's just outside our facility. So those are kinds of things we're doing, and that's how you can get a hold of us.
So definitely contact Sarah and others at Summit Park, Metro Parks.
Miss Julie might have some things to add.
Yeah, Maren, we got somebody here who wants to ask.
Okay.
I just want to kind of answer the question a little bit and suggest that y'all come shop the Summit Lake Farmers Market this summer.
It's on
Great
Tuesday.
idea.
It's on
Yeah, great
Tuesdays,
idea.
starts sometime in June or July. You can look it up on the website. It's on Summit, Let's Grow Akron.
And is that hosted at the nature center?
It's two doors up at the community center.
And connected by the towpath.
And
so
connected
you
on the
can
towpath.
visit both.
Yep.
You can ride your bike and put your little basket on and come shopping.
Thank you.
And also, Let's Grow Akron in general is a great organization, as well as South Street Ministry, who we have Joe Tucker here to get involved more actually in the neighborhood and the community that's happening. Let's Grow Akron has made Summit Lake into one of the places that has one of the neighborhoods in the city that has the most community gardens. And they're beautiful. They've got like a kids garden and all sorts of really wonderful assets here.
Where is that again?
Throughout the neighborhood, there's a ton of community gardens all throughout the neighborhood with Let's Grow Akron. And then South Street Ministry also has been key and essential in this neighborhood in helping people get the resources and the things that they need.
I believe Let's Grow Akron has over 50 different gardens.
Just in this neighborhood.
Well, yeah, throughout the area, but
Yeah.
we have a lot of gardens.
Yeah, there's like
Very good. If you could even put the names of those organizations in the chat, that would be helpful so people can see that and we can save it in the recording as well. So one question is, how did they take the golf course back to dirt? Was it scraping? Was it herbicides? Just huge project.
It was primarily the use of herbicide. We actually hired a company called Davy Golf. They're a division of the Davy Tree Company, and they are usually hired to make golf courses lush and green. We hired them to murder our golf course. So. It took them 2 years. It took 2 years to get all that turf grass out. And it was primarily the use of herbicide. It's glyphosate that we generally use, or Roundup.
Wow.
I know that there really is no, and that's a whole nother topic of discussion. The use of herbicides in our natural areas. All ecologists, or the vast majority of ecologists today, we are using them. We're using them in the parks and all of our natural areas, all the park districts and conservation organizations around the country. This has become a standard tool, and it really is the only tool we have to.
Sounds like you have to weigh out the benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you done any research with mixing different humic substances with the glyphosate so that it's can be used in smaller doses to enter the plant and it's has less of a negative impact on the surrounding wildlife?
Yes, yeah, we do. We use surfactants like soaps that really increase the effectiveness. You have to use less herbicide. We have also experimented with organic versions of herbicides. There's a product called Scythe. It's basically a high concentration of vinegar, and we have used some of those. They're a lot more expensive, and they are less effective. You have to apply them more
Have you
often.
done burning?
Yeah, we do burning. We burn. We do prescribed burns at Springfield Metro Park. That's our biggest one. Last year we did our biggest burn. We burned 150 acres. It's so cool to see that happen. Yeah, but we do burns in certain areas. There's some areas where we just can't because of the logistics of the neighborhood. But fire is one of the best tools that we have.
Are you worried at all about the effect of using Roundup so close to our water sources with what can happen with the algae blooms?
I worry about everything all the time. When we are working in aquatic environments, there is a wetland approved version of Roundup. It's called Aqua Pro. It's not supposed to. And again, I'm really not a chemist. I just know that it is approved for use in water.
Is that helpful with Japanese knotweed? Because that is the vein of my existence.
Yes, it is. Herbicide is about the only thing you can use to address Japanese knotweed. And that was a huge thing at the golf course. Yeah. The Cuyahoga River at Valley View was lined with knotweed. It took 3 years to get it under control. That stuff is vicious.
Yeah, but it is under control now?
For now.
Well, it's all up the banks of the little Cuyahoga, so it's going to.
Yeah, that is a problem. It's under control in our park, but upstream and downstream, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So we might need to ask this question of the room. This is one from Doug saying, what are some common environmental and climate injustices that exist a few blocks away from Summit Lake that people endure on a daily basis? So it might be the kind which they can act, or those challenges that require outside action. So environmental and climate injustices just blocks away. Are there some that still you could speak to?
I could take a stab at it. Did anyone else in the room want to speak to that as well? Environmental and climate injustices within a few blocks of Summit Lake. I mean, a lot of the things that we just spoke about. This area is a hot spot for infant mortality. That is a legacy of the industrial pollution that happened here.
Abandoned houses.
Abandoned houses.
Lead.
Yeah, lead.
Well, also there is a lot of heat island effect as you get further into the neighborhood and away from just specifically the lake area. It also has high, there's also like a lot of issues with high blood pressure and diabetes and these different things, going back to it being a food desert or food apartheid, depending on what terminology you'd like to come to grips with.
I think too, that you mentioned about the fragmentation of natural resources, I guess, or green spaces. And I just think that we try to connect different groups of different fragmented spaces of nature, like with the work that you're doing. But one of the challenges that we don't do well is connecting people of color and other people in the communities to our green spaces. So the parks are a huge asset here, but they're not accessible to everyone. And so I think this is an example of addressing that, bringing it to a neighborhood. But we've still got a lot of neighborhoods that don't have direct access to the parks.
Well, that ties us to another question, which is there public transportation to the park?
There is to some, but not enough. And that is connecting our parks to more people through public transportation has been a desire of my director, Lisa King, since the day she came into that position. It's challenging. Metro RTA has limited resources, and their primary goal is getting people to and from work. A few of our parks are on bus routes, but not very many.
Mm-hmm. Maybe groups can have field trips or somehow find some solutions.
Also, the cancer rates in this neighborhood are very high because of the years and years of dumping.
That's all the questions we have. Oh, has the soil been contaminated is one more question that has come up.
I would say the answer is historically, yeah. I mean, a lot of the soil and historically, there's been a lot of contamination in this neighborhood. The soil of the lake, the sediments of the lake were heavily contaminated. They are, for the most part, overlaid now by cleaner sediments that are kind of locking some of that pollution down at the bottom. But I would say, yeah, the overall, the soil and the landscape of this community has been polluted a lot over the years.
And especially with the 2008 housing collapse, there was a number of homes that were privately demolished that people just knocked into the ground, which has created, another layer of contamination due to environmental racism.
So there is one more question, and that is, who is working to repair re-enchantment using deep storytelling? Like, using the arts and education and sacred activism, etc. Is there someone doing that?
Stay tuned for the next conversation.
All right.
I was curious to the last question because Miss Julie, obviously, she's grown produce for her restaurant in Summit Lake, and the place where former Lincoln School was located is also a place that my organization has soil tested and brownfield tested, and it's actually the soil's fine there to grow.
Yeah, I was gonna say soil testing is king.
Yeah, so it's
soil test, amend, do what you gotta do to make it okay, but we weren't too bad either over there.
So I think as you move into the community, the soil, I haven't experienced any sort of.
I wasn't right here on the lake itself, so I don't know, but I don't know historically what was on the properties I was at either, past the buildings and driveways that I demolished.
And like a big thing that happens if there was a building on the location, like soil could have been contaminated there, but when they remove everything, they bring a lot of fill dirt in. Which
Crappy.
Yeah, but so that fill dirt is coming from another place that if that wasn't contaminated, that's being brought into the neighborhood. So maybe that's bearing whatever contamination was here. So there's a lot of factors with like the vacant lands that are here. It's not just like the house is gone and it's like reverted back to its natural state.
I do have an entire jar of marbles that I dug up in different properties in Summit Lake. I have a nice collection everywhere I went. I have marbles, dug up all kinds of weird things, including car parts and all kinds of crazy stuff.
So we'll have a museum eventually. Well,
yeah. Well, and so that's another point of environmental racism is what kind of fill dirt gets filled in certain neighborhoods and areas of the city. As I also do a lot of gardening on vacant lots in areas that were redlined. Oftentimes it was like unclassified fill dirt that the city would throw in places. I'm working currently on a park that is filled with unclassified fill dirt. I mean, we're basically finding like bases of a foundation in it while we're trying to work through it. Yeah, each parcel has almost different soil because there's always a fill dirt issue.
I have a stack of bricks, just a stack of bricks that somebody like enjoyed their life, probably had a patio, like I always find it interesting who played with the marbles, like
that's part of that storytelling. Well, we're going to stop here with the questions, and first thank you to Mike Thank you to all that have been giving responses and who have done this monumental project.